Why struggle through a post-merger integration when you can glide through it? Why deal with the PMI integration challenges when you can overcome them even before they occur? Why move slow when you can move at pace? What are the world's leading PMI experts doing right now to achieve profit-accelerating integrations? This podcast will give you all the answers to these questions and many more. My name is Dudley Peacock, and welcome to the 100 Days and Beyond podcast. Hello and welcome everyone to our podcast today. We've got a combination podcast. It's the weirdest thing today because besides the normal 100 Days and Beyond podcast where we deal with sort of merger and acquisitions, post-merger integration and or post-acquisition integration work, we also have some marketing, but also about people. It's a podcast that sort of is a combination of a whole lot of things. And I've got a really interesting bloke today, Richard Bailey. Welcome. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks, Dudley. Great to be here.
I want to just go through a quick introduction in terms of some of the takeaways that I got from my initial conversation, and sort of run through expanding a little bit on that, because your background really, if I look at your educational background, I mean, you studied history and you studied something else. I mean, you're going to tell us a bit about your life journey and how you ended up doing what you're doing today compared to where you thought young Richard was going to be, in the early days. So very interesting journey you've taken. But what's really fascinating, and I think that the audience should be well aware, is that you're a guy that's very well versed and diverse in your thinking across multiple sectors and parts of a business. But you have a very strong, I would say, connection to the people side of business. So when I look at your profile, you talk about strategic growth, transformation, and this human cloud. And this was a really fascinating part of our conversation leading up into this podcast. Is about the way that work is changing, and especially because you've also, when I look at some of the other things you mentioned, you talk about 15 plus years of experience in leading and driving change at strategic and operational levels, global, regional programs, etc., across multiple industries. You also have been in an M&A environments, mergers and acquisitions. You've been part of large-scale transformation programs, so you understand change. You understand that whole nature of the beast, if you like, because there's so many moving parts in that space. But you also talk about delivery within a structured and bespoke methodologies. Now, when I look at your top skills, you talk about PMO. So that's project management office. That's very, very structured. Completely different to what you studied. I mean, you started studying history, and I suppose history is also a sequence of events. I suppose a project is a sequence of planned events. And I suppose if you go back at the end of a project and you look at the learnings and the history of a project, you can probably extrapolate a whole lot of things out of that. But when I look at your profile, you talk about being an active promoter, advisor, consultant, and POC. Is that proof of concept Kickstarter?
Yes.
To tech startups, multiple fields, especially in open talent, the human cloud. Again, it comes up. And talent innovation, including fractional talents. And those are some of the things I'd like to touch on. I know you have a few extra sort of really good pointers that it'll be massive value to the audience today. And again, thank you for joining us today. And tell us, just give us a little bit of your background. I've tried to sort of lead and connect to what we're trying to achieve here, but tell us a bit about sort of your where you come from and when and what you're doing today.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Dudley. Appreciate the introduction. So, as you alluded to, when my and let me move my there's a picture. You see that picture there? My wife, my mom has painted it, and I'm still getting used to it. So I'm moving it because it's disconcerting looking at it. Obviously, my mom loves me, but it's disconcerting looking at a picture of yourself in these sunglasses. There you go. But it's a good painting. I'm told. I won't comment. So as you alluded to, for my undergrad I studied history, and then I moved on to international development. for postgrad. History was really because I'm fascinated with movements in history and reactions in different parts of the world and different geographies to big events, and how they come about. International development was more because I was fascinated with developing economies, and so that particular degree was around how economies developing economies, how they develop, what do we even mean by developed or underdeveloped, and I focused on a few different topics. And I'd always thought that I was either going to work in the ministry for a church, or I was going to work in an NGO or work in policy, in a government setting. And then whilst I was doing my postgrad, as I chose to do it part-time, I also always wanted to work. And I didn't tell you this, I had a side advertising business that I started in my postgrad. And so I worked as a contractor, as we would call it, in what's now Shell, in the IT department. Okay. And so started, and since then, actually, nearly every one of my roles have been as a freelancer, a contractor, an interim, a consultant. I know we use these words interchangeably, nearly all of my career. And I remember a conversation that I was listening to. So bear in mind, I was, in my mid-20s or so, and there was a bunch of guys around a table, and they were all probably in about their 50s at the time, and they were having this intense debate about IT and how, we are running the company, and without us, it's going to... And I remember sitting there thinking, hang on a minute, if I stay in this for 20, 30 years, potentially my view on what drives the company is going to become incredibly myopic. And so I decided I'm getting out of IT. I still had worked and I have worked in IT and different tech, but I purposefully chose to work in different industries across different functions. So whether that's in finance and HR, etc., and supply chain, on the manufacturing side, operations, because I wanted to gain an end-to-end view of a business and actually have worked in different industries and in different parts of those businesses. So that at the time, I thought, look, in 20, 30 years' time, I don't want to be sitting around a table thinking of the world in a myopic way. I want to be able to go into any company and add value at a strategic and operational level, and then be able to look at it end to end. And as we talked before, there's absolutely a place for having a specialism in a certain vertical, but there's also a value to being able to look across an enterprise and see how each part knits together. And so it's not surprising that I found myself in the PMO type world, which is all about pulling things together to govern a bunch of projects or initiatives, and then I branched out from that into the talent world. So, and that's been in the last 4 or 5 years, and pre-pandemic, as I became more fascinated with the future of work, And at the time, for me, it was the question driving me was, what is the future of work in 2030? Okay, what is that going to look like? I happen to have been working with a scale-up company, which was through a large corporate. It was their corporate innovation arm that they'd acquired a piece of, and that was specifically in the talent space, building private talent pools for companies. And they were acquired by another company. And so I became more and more fascinated with this area, and also from a consulting perspective. So hence that's where I am now as a slight addition to your introduction. And I love what you're talking about as well yourself, fractional CMO, because I see this more and more post pandemic, and it was already starting, but the fractionalization of work and how tech and platforms enable us to be able to actually fractionalize work, and that can be of even more value than not doing that. And this is where I think that the discussion around talent needs to go.
Yeah, I'm also finding, and I may shock some members of the audience, so I might get some troll comments, but I think the skill and art of management has also changed, and has not changed for the better. You have, I mean, I think the traditional founder CEO. If you take 50 or 100 years ago, the businesses were generally quite simple in a lot of ways. Yes, there were lots of complexities, but today everything is moving at such a rapid rate that you've got to onboard new talent very, very quickly. They've got to perform and be able to deliver results very, very quickly. They got to start, hit the ground running, and management as a discipline or a skill is struggling, I think, to keep up with that fast pace of change. I've been looking at sort of the SaaS environment, if you like, those new startup SaaS companies, everything has lots of bling and shiny things on the outside, but on the inside, the standard business principles apply, but everything is done at a fast pace. They must onboard people quickly. They must find people quickly. They must place people quickly. They must understand what the strategy is, who the ideal customer profile is. What is their sort of manifesto? I mean, what do they stand for? I mean, what is the product supposed to do? What's the outcome, the product or service or whatever? What's the product market fit? And do I have the right pricing? Do I have the right delivery mechanism and onboarding of customers? And then how do I stop churn and things like that? That's only in the SaaS environment. I mean, if you look at across multiple industries, I think management is under massive pressure. I think that's if you look at the PMO as that space, and I'm just going to throw it out there as a curveball. I think it's almost like sometimes like herding cats in a way, because you've got to try and keep everyone doing their day jobs in a standard organization, plus deliver on certain projects that are managed or by non-line managers. So you have line management, and then you have non-line management, and you have different deliverables, different KPIs and new KPIs. And especially if you look at M&A and post-merger integration work, there you get another layer of work that gets added onto your normal day job over and above all the internal projects that are that you have to deliver inside a company. So, so I mean, that's where I see the major challenges across the workspace, and how that's accelerated over the last few years, especially. What's your comments on that sort of that view that I have?
So, I mean, firstly, just to come back on the PMO point, the history of that as a governance structure, a management structure, it comes from the military, and in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and it moved into the corporate world. And like you say, even in the M&A space, there is a place for a PMO, and it'll be called something different, but it'll have a similar functionality, being able to oversee the process of
the IMO, the Integration Management Office. So
exactly.
It's just a different name, but it's a PMO essentially.
And I've heard different acronyms in the IMO space, adding bits on, adding other acronyms to kind of make it more end to end. But I think for me, part of this goes back to, as you say, there are certain business principles that are actually, when they're done well, it's done. If you did it in 1950, 1960, in 2030, 2050, they're all still applicable. Partly because it's to do with people, and people don't change really that much. And so I think what I've seen in that space is not having extra layers of, and specifically in that space, of governance for the sake of it. So this is why now when I get involved in PMO work, I don't typically do, I'm going to administrate, because I've also worked on the other side where I'm reporting to a PMO, in that setting. And to be honest, sometimes it's a complete waste of time. People are just annoyed at you. Why are you coming to ask me this, whether I'm green, red, or whatever? I've done my deliverables, etc. It's just, you're distracting me from doing whatever I'm doing, And so for me, part of the skill of this is being able to figure out, in my business as usual, how do I integrate that change, in the management structure? Because typically what happens is there's the, what I call keep the lights on organization, and then there's a layer on top as we're starting to change things. And so for me, the challenge from a leadership perspective is integrating those two as fast as possible, so that lights on becomes the change. Yeah, and it's not easy by any stretch, but that's why fractional talent is so important, because what you can say is, look, what is our goal? What are we trying to achieve? What particular financial objectives, product objectives, whatever that is, and also have an understanding that we probably don't have everything we need in the given organization in terms of people. So how are we going to your point, as fast as possible, use what I call the human cloud to and leverage that experience that is out there right now to help us accelerate and integrate those two. Yeah. So I think that for me, that's where I would comment back on what you've mentioned there. But it's not an easy thing, and hence people are constantly having issues with this. But it's really important, I think, as a leader, to be able to understand what are my levers from a people perspective. Yeah, because people deliver in businesses at the end of the day, and tech is there from my perspective to enable that. It's not the driving force, and so we have to figure out the best processes that actually support the people to work to whatever objectives. Yeah, but I would say part of this as well is understanding the maturity state of a given business. Yeah, and so a lot of businesses, as you know, and I'm sure the audience appreciates, are in firefighting mode. So it's almost impossible to think strategically if you're in firefighting mode, because you're just trying to put fires out. If someone comes along and gives you an idea that could actually innovate, it's like, well, is this helping me put out a fire? I'm not interested. Yeah, and then you move from firefighting to kind of what I call keep the lights on operational. You haven't even got to a tactical state yet, and you're not even near a strategic state. So part of this as well, from a consulting point of view, is helping particularly a C-suite or the key leaders of a business to understand what stage you're in, and this is all about growth. Yeah, I often say to people that there's a great film that I always recommend people watch, and allied to this chap who's, from my perspective, is the kind of father of change, John Cotter, who's written lots about how people change, how organizations change. There's a film called 12 Angry Men, and it's with Henry Fonda, and it's a black and white film from the 50s. And this film is about, it's set in a jury room. Yeah. And the film, what happens is the jurors are all convinced this person who's on trial is guilty, bar one. And the film is about how this person convinces everyone else that he's actually not guilty, and how they go through each person, finding how people relate. How can I use this person to convince that person? The process of change, yeah, to getting to a goal. And to me, that's the art of leadership, is managing change yourself, but then being able to be an expert at how to manage your organization through change. But you need to know the framework, and you need to be honest where you're actually at. And so I think that, this is what excites me about the human cloud, is that you can leverage people very quickly who are experts in your industry or your area, if you know where to look. And that's the challenge. So, I mean, I've actually set up another business called fluidtalent.com, which is specifically about this, helping businesses to leverage the human cloud. And also you can build your own platform through it. So, because I see this as a great opportunity, to help businesses accelerate. Because as you say, the pace of change is so fast, and it's impossible for one person to keep up with the pace of change. So for me, it's just inevitable. You must draw on the cloud.
Yeah, you must draw on the cloud. You must draw on the talent that's out there, but you must also be able to manage and guide the right talent. So it's not only the selection, but it's also the guiding of it. And when we spoke before the podcast, you mentioned something which was very interesting, was to try and find the balance between full-time and fractional or interim or part-time or whatever the term is. And I think there's so many different terms out there, but essentially it's a fractional role. It's at what stage of the business, and you're absolutely right, what stage of the business are you in? or that project or division is in, or you could be launching a new product within a stable existing business. I mean, that might be understaffed, and how do you get that fulfilled?
Yeah.
I mean, M&A is one sort of sub project, if you like, that happens within the lights, keeping the lights on environment. But I think what was very interesting was that you still have to maintain the balance between the core and what you bring on as a fractional. So give me your view on what does that actually mean?
Okay, so again, part of this depends on not just the maturity of the business, but the size of the business. Yeah. So I'll give you an example. And by the way, we can talk offline, but I have also published a very short article on 7 takeaways that I've got from talking to founders over the past few years. And one of the issues I find is from an investment perspective, especially in a scale-up business, it's important that you have people on board in the current framework. It's important to have people on board permanently, and often there's a sweetener of equity, to make sure that you've got people committed, and especially at a senior level. And then if the business, which is a small percentage, but they are successful, particularly in the tech space, they IPO, and of course everyone wants to be involved in that game, whether you're an investor or someone who's potentially employed. So that setup means that you need to search very carefully for the right people to bring on board permanently. Okay. And that's even at a top level. And then as people build out their team. So that's the traditional model. However, where it falls down is it's not fast enough. You can't find these people fast enough. So that's where it's important to have an option where I pull on the human cloud through various talent platforms, or you can build your own. And then it's saying, okay, so what are my outcomes? Where do I need to be? How do I leverage the people that are in the house? And how do I outsource either a traditional outsourcer, or I'm pulling from a particular talent cloud? Yeah. And it's understanding the right mix to deliver on your outcomes. Yeah. I mean, I'll give you an example. There's a tech software that I'm partnered with through Fluid Talent that you can build your own freelance marketplace within a day if you've got the right information. Yeah. And so he basically, there's a big enterprise that now wants to build 2 of them, okay, for some end clients, particularly software engineers, and another private talent pool on AWS specialists. But they said to him, we have no idea how to market this. So we see there's a market for this, but we just have no idea how to market this. And he said, well, look, we could go to a consultancy to ask, but they don't really exist. I mean, who's focusing on this? And of course he said, well, what do you know? By the way, I can put you in touch with Richard from Fluid Talent. We specialize in this. So for me, that's just an example of an established organization that's serving a lot of big customers that see the need for these pools of talent, but actually they don't know how to leverage that and even market it. Yeah. Because of course, with all of this, it's all about the buyer. And if you are not able to from a marketing perspective, even if you aren't able to demonstrate why you need this, even if people know they need it, and be able to fit it into their business model, no one's going to buy it. Yeah. So now what we have at our advantage is the proliferation of these platforms, and on a smaller scale, you've got not small in business, but small in terms of things being delivered. We've got Fiverr and Upwork are the biggest examples. Yeah. So if you want someone to go and do digital marketing and run a campaign, you can find someone to do that. Can you find a team to do that? Not yet. Yeah. I do know of other companies where you can effectively hire in, and they call it elastic talent, distributed.com, great business. And you can hire in whole teams that can come in and help you develop whatever it is you want to develop. And they've got curated freelancers from all over the world. And they are focused about giving those freelancers the best possible work. But it's highly specialized, and they're not cutting corners. that's really high quality. They've had a lot of investment. BT Digital is another that's partnered with them. So I see this happening more and more and more. Yeah, and so there's a need for people to be able to help, particularly leaders, understand that this is available. Yeah,
I
people in the
think
traditional HR space aren't necessarily even aware of that.
yeah, if I could just add a bit to that, and that is there's a traditional model, right? So you're running a business and you say, oh, you know what, we actually have a position that we want to create to do a particular thing, or
Yeah.
we need some additional resource. Let's go out there and see what we can find. Okay, so that's, for me, that's the wrong way around. You should be having, and I love this word pool, this talent pool, because I think that's exactly what this is. You should be marketing your business, your vision and your whatever, and you should be building a pool of talent that you can draw into at the time when you need it, way in advance of you actually needing it.
Yes.
But who actually thinks about that? So I think you mentioned earlier in the discussion is, that you're in this what is this, fire mode, or what is it,
Firefighting,
fighting and firefighting mode, where you're still just trying to beat the fires up, but you're not thinking about hiring new people. It's just like, geez, there's just so many balls up in the air. But in fact, that's the right time to do it, is to start, and if you've got the capacity, of course, and the mental capacity, that is. But it's to go and build a talent pool long before you need it, being able to articulate what the vision and the direction of the strategy and the strategy of the business really is in terms of where you're going. Because, and I think this is something that you mentioned, and I thought, Richard, you are so right, is the talent pool out there have their own value propositions. They are actually marketing themselves on an individual level or at a group level as having a particular value proposition. In other words, they have a skill set or an ability or something that they can bring to your business, and that they've decided to narrow their market, their niche, their target for that particular role. So now, if you're going out and you're looking for talent, you're actually going and looking for another service provider, in actual fact, not another person to come and work for you.
Yeah.
And it's not like they're sitting there waiting for you to make the call or send the email, or like, would you like to join the company? They're out there selling their services to other companies already.
Yes.
They are fractional already. They have identified their own, and I'm not saying all of them, but they've identified where they are good, what they enjoy, what they don't want to do. Because they, for the talent that I've taken on, over the last few years, and especially now, is you have this conversation with a person, and they actually a lot clearer about what they can and can't do, and will and will not do, and in terms of their purpose and what they want to fulfill in their own lives. It's like, wait a minute, who's actually having the interview? Is it the employer, or is it the person that's fractional? And I think all of a sudden that dynamic has changed. And I think, I don't know what your comments around that is, but I think the advanced creation of a talent pool makes a lot more sense from a business point of view now than ever before.
Yes. So I'm sure, so you'll be aware, and your audience, of a more traditional part of a business in finance or expertise, FP&A, financial planning and analysis. And when that's done well, it's fantastic. And you've got some really good forecasts, you're constantly analyzing it, etc. So I say, well, you need talent planning and analysis. You've got to figure out what does your partner need to look like? You need, and look down the road. Now, so there are some companies that I know of, I've worked with. There's a particular tool called OrgView, it's really good. And you are looking at that. You're saying, here's my organization now. Let's say I want to expand to the US as one of my markets, and maybe Canada. Let's just give an example. And so what does that mean for my organization? I know what it means financially, but what does that mean for the kind of people that I need to have, and where am I going to get them from? Yeah. And so from a financial perspective, you can build different models, and you can start to see, if I do this and that, okay, here's going to be the outcome. This is what's going to happen to my P&L, my EBITDA, whatever. But from a people perspective, it isn't always so specific. And so there are tools out there where you can do this. You can say, you can basically build parallel organizations before you embark on it, and see what the impact is, not just financially, but how is that really going to help me into the market? How is it really going to help me deliver that strategy? You know, so that's what I think is key from a talent perspective. And we can do this. It's absolutely possible, which is back to my original point of being able to look at a business at multiple levels, yeah, and in different dimensions, and then saying, okay, now we've looked at that, we've modeled it, not just from a financial perspective, and we can see that this is the best choice that we have to make. It's never 100%. And then at the same time, having a structure in place where you can tweak it, because we have to be able to tweak and move. Yeah, it's never going to be the same in 3 years and 10 years, but at least you can set a direction. And so I think for me that's really important. And from my perspective, a massive piece of value that anyone in, where you call it HR, talent, whatever the word you want to use, or a chief people officer, etc., can provide that value, you know, to the C-suites. And because what you want to be, you want to be clear especially as a leader of a business, and is that I picked that strategy, I picked that goal, and I feel very confident that I'm going to have the right people at the right time, you know. And that's where I say you've got to then have that mix that says, okay, I need to have this much of these people core in terms of staying with me for the 3-year journey, and along the way, I'm going to bring in experts in these areas, and here's where I'm planning to get them from, if they exist, and if they don't, but I know they need them, I'm going to create my own pool a year ahead of time, where people can put their availability, and I'm incentivizing them to work with me, you know. And like you say, they're very clear. People in the fractional space know what they're good at, know what their rates are, know when they're available. They're kind of running their own business, or they've come together as a group. And you know, and from a consulting perspective, I've also seen this challenge the traditional consultancies, because how do they operate? How do they make money? Yeah, they make money on margin, selling permanent people out. Yeah, that's how they make money. So of course, when you see more consultancies come out of the woodwork over time, why is that? It's because there are permanent consultants working in businesses, and they realize that margin, and they say, hang on a minute, why don't we can do this, and we can actually specialize, and they then proliferate that model. And so and then even consultancies have to build contingency pools now, because you know there'll be areas, for example, in ESG, in green energy, etc. There's not going to be enough supply, so you're going to have to attract these people, yeah, and make sure that you can provide them the work, etc. So that dynamic, as you say, changes. It depends on the industry, because of course there isn't always as much demand in some areas. But that's so for me, it's a really fascinating time to be alive in a time where it's the fundamentals of business are still important, and they're absolutely valid. But we also have to understand that there are also changes in models, and because of the technology we have, we can see how we can pull these worlds together, and see the end-to-end piece as one. And that's what it, for me, is just fascinating, and we're completely able to do that now.
Yeah, and I got to say, I mean, I've been in and out of businesses, consulting, and that probably almost 30 years now. And that's consulting on the tech side of things as a fractional CMO. I've done a whole lot of projects with different types of companies, and it's been so often that you go into an organization and someone has been recruited. They've joined the company. They've been given the traditional job description.
Mm-hmm.
But by the time you arrive and you engage then with the client and you say, okay, tell me who's your people and sort of where's the structure? Tell me why this person is doing that. What are they reporting to, and so on and so forth. And you start unpacking that a bit, and then you realize that the original job description that they were hired on and the purpose they were hired for is no longer near what they're doing right now. So they were hired as the bookkeeper, but now they're sitting in the warehouse doing something else, or they were hired as the sales guy, but now they're doing I don't know, customer fulfillment on the back end, and they're helping out with tech support. And it's like, has anybody sort of kept track of that? Is it so that's been sort of what I've realized a lot of times. The more senior, obviously, the less that sort of happens, but again, it does happen. Where now these days it's almost as if management and people that are developing strategy and these models and that have to be so much more visionary, if you like, and more strategic in the way that they structure what talent they need for when, for what deliverable. And I think when you and I spoke leading into this podcast, we spoke about outcomes. Sort of trying to work out what the outcomes are that I'm trying to achieve, and not just to fill the seat of the space that needs to be occupied to fulfill a particular task. And it's that fight between, I need someone there to do that, but have I really thought through the outcome I want achieved individually and also as a group, for a particular department? Give me your sort of expanded thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I completely agree. And when you really focus on those outcomes, and by the way, it's also important to note that strategy is a word that's bandied about all over the place. Half of the time, lots of strategy is not strategic at all. It's just a tactical plan, and also transformation is another word that's doesn't necessarily absolutely transform the business, because you come back in 3-4 years and it's the same business. So that's just tweaking the business. Now, when it comes to outcomes, I look at it in a slightly different way. I say, look, here's your outcomes that you want to get to, whatever those are. And as you said, they need to be thought through. And so assuming that's done, there's a certain amount of money that you've got, a pot of money to be able to do what it is you want it to do. So then the question becomes, okay, so now this pot is consumed by a certain amount, as in the people we've currently got. And then, okay, we've got a bit extra. And for me, that's the wrong way of going about it. It's saying, no, those are the outcomes. Here's the pot we have. What's the processes and what is the skills that we specifically need to get there? And then you're saying, okay, do we have that? If we've got that, great. Okay, that takes a bit of the pot away, et cetera, et cetera. So you're faced with the fact of potentially fundamentally changing your organization because of those outcomes that you're trying to get to. And then you start to be more agile about saying, okay, this is the real skill set we need if we're really going to get that done. Okay, so is it we're going to have some people permanent? Is it we're going to pull on some traditional outsourcing or develop our own pool from more in a human cloud sense? So it becomes number one, at the beginning, you're planning it to be more agile, and number two, you're starting to use this pot more dynamically, and I would say the other thing is, of course, when a business is aiming to get to a strategic goal, along the way you want to see growth, so then the pot is never fixed, and of course the part of the challenge is, if you're just trying to do it for one function, if you're, let's say, doing it in the finance function, but HR might not be on board or IT might not be, and you've got people in different places, So for me, there's a piece of work that has to align those parts of the business, or you've got marketing and sales who are, you know, clear about their go-to-market, etc., and they want to get on with things, but actually, and they're going to sell a product, but then when the customer comes to using the product, there's no real follow-up. The customer journey isn't really mapped out, and it sounds great, but actually now when you engage with this product or this service, 6 months down the road, you see that it sounded great, but you know it's failing. Is that the problem with the salespeople? Normally not. It's what's happening behind the scenes. Yeah. So that's what I mean. It's worth the time to think about this and reflect on what this means end to end, because it really pays off. And you know, when you're in firefighting mode or just operational mode, I understand. I've been there. It's really hard to say, I don't have the time for that. I don't have the time to, you know, sit and, but it's worth it because you see the fruits of that, not immediately, but you see it 3 years down the road, 6 years down the road, etc. And people in the business will be clear about why they're doing things and the meaning behind their roles, yeah, however they're defined. So so for me, this is part of what I call being a business architect. Yeah, we've got technical architects, but this is what true business architecture is about, is really understanding the blueprint. And we all live in houses of some description, and houses need tweaking, changing. And but if you're going to build a house or rebuild a house, it's painful, you know. But you have to be just acknowledge the fact that no, might be a hard road for some time. Being clear with the organization, particularly in an M&A situation, when you've got, you know, 3 businesses trying to merge, and a big investment house, you know, trying to push on the pace, and so that for me is, you know, as a leader, it's imperative to be able to manage the change yourself first, so that you can lead from the front, understanding all these things we're talking about.
Yeah, I love that. I think you hit the nail on the head. I want to sort of just throw a slightly different sort of question at you, and that's traditionally. I mean, if you again going back and say, okay, where are we now compared to where we were not so long ago, and how things have accelerated and changed. The traditional approach is you go through HR, you do your application, etc. You know, you got recruited either through a recruitment office, or there was an advert that was placed and you submitted you know, your resume or your CV. If I look at the thing called training and upskilling and sort of, now the question comes is the budget and this is based on your experience now, you know, do you say, do I apply more money to training my existing people? And I think the yin and yang almost, if you like, or the opposite is going to be, do I just hire in a fractional bit of talent for that portion of work? Is it where, and I think that's a strategic question, is do I take, maybe it's tactical, I don't know, but do I take my current core workforce and rather skill them up in terms of their ability to be more clear about what the outcome is we're trying to achieve, and be able to brief and onboard fractional talent better? Maybe that should be on someone's CV or resume. When you're employing them full time, do you have the ability to articulate and clearly explain and onboard new talent, or part-time or fractional talent? That's for that. That could be a training requirement that's not, I don't know if it's massively available at this stage, but it could very well be a very good thing to get involved in. And on the flip side is it really worth training somebody, a full-time employee, because they may or may not leave the organization because they might find a better opportunity elsewhere? Now you've invested in an individual where you could maybe just have gone into your talent pool, drawn in a bit of additional talent, got the particular KPI performed, or the job or the outcome or whatever it is, or just use that person from time to time as and when you need it. And that's where the fractional comes in.
Yeah.
because they understand your organization, but you only use them when you need them. So I just want to get your view on training versus bringing in external talent.
Yeah, love that. So I think part of this goes back to the point about strategy or direction, or what you're actually trying to achieve. Yeah. So and it's the stage of the business as well, in terms of how much you can invest in helping your existing staff to grow. And because it goes back to saying we need these outcomes, and this is the kind of skill set that we need to get there. So if we're looking at two parallel worlds here that are merging, the one world is saying I've got these people who are on the books already, effectively paid for, and I need to upskill them because I need this delivered or that delivered. Yeah. And I take the and I understand there's a time lag. Okay. But also, of course, people benefit from being upskilled, and they grow, and there's potential for their careers. Yeah. And there's a whole proposition around that the company needs to make, so that people are staying and they feel like, look, I'm really growing here, and of course I'm going to commit to this. And then you've got the other side, which says, I can see that I'm not quite going to get, on my upskill trajectory across the population of the people I employ, we're actually not going to get there because we don't have the skills in place. And that's where you've got to say, no, we have to, within the process of growing our business, have fractional talent, that is delivering on those outcomes. And the other thing I would say is, what I've often seen as a consultant going into organizations is sometimes people feel threatened. They go, oh, this person's a consultant, they're on some day rate, etc. And if someone isn't in that world, they don't appreciate that you're still building your own business especially as a consultant. If you're in a smaller business, it's not like everyone's being, sitting on yachts, but that can be the impression. So I think part of the challenge is also to educate current staff that are going to stay with the organization. Look, we're bringing people in because we've got a specific outcome. Some of those people may actually stay, become in as fractional talent. But I would say, for me, where I've seen consulting work best is part of the role of those people, the teams, or the fractional talent you bring in, if it's an individual or teams, is to actually do a really great handover process to people internally. For me personally, when I'm consulting in a place, I will never leave somewhere if I feel like I haven't done a good handover and I haven't upskilled people in the organization. That's part of my own remit. Yeah. And so I'm delivering on things, but I think for me, that's part of the challenge, is saying you're coming in to do this and this, but I know, for example, I might have some less experienced people who I know are on this upskill trajectory. I'm going to partner them with this fractional talent that comes in over time, because guess what? They're gonna learn tremendously from those people, because they've been around different organizations and they can bring new perspectives. And so I see this all the time, and for me as a consultant, it's really meaningful when I take even the organization I'm working with now built an on-demand platform in a recruitment space. I seek out the people who want to grow and say, let's get some time. How can I help you? And, how can I use my experience to? And so on the flip side, I think if you're going to go along this model, which I think is important to be agile, it's being really clear up front. Whoever comes into your organization, we have a learning culture, and we expect that we share our knowledge. And of course, you compensate people for that. It's people spend years building a network, building knowledge, and if you want the best people in your organization, then you've got to pay what is the market rate. So I think that's how I'd answer that. Is this doesn't in any way change that you've got to upskill your people, but it's how you do that. And there's also some really cool companies I know in the learning space that are doing amazing things in terms of using AI, etc., to help people to grow, and very personalized training. But yeah, that's a whole a whole other topic.
It is a whole other topic, but you answered it very well, and I appreciate the thought that you've been putting into it. So if I so when I look at that that space in terms of the transfer of skills, I think bringing in someone from a fractional point of view is massively important for improving your permanent staff skills, but also bringing in tools, bringing in methodologies, bringing in practices and procedures that work elsewhere.
Yeah.
And again, it comes again in cross pollination, and it's I think in the old if I go, I mean, you studied history, the tribes used to, as soon as the blood started going, there was a bit too much incest, if you like, they went out to other tribes to get new blood into the, that was a thing. And it's almost like the same thing happens to companies. When you just have the same, you're rotating the same staff, you don't necessarily have the same cross pollination, you don't have the transfer of skills, you don't have external people asking different questions.
Yeah.
And asking questions that you assume you know the answer, and you assume that the person that you're working with has the same answer as you. I mean, I've had it, and you must have seen it in consulting arrangements. Your initial intervention is get everyone around the table. Okay, tell me what do you guys, where are you? Tell me, answer these questions, and then they start disagreeing with each other. And I mean, I've had it once where I've had the directors almost grab each other across the table because they thought the other one was doing this, and they actually never really sat down and really thrashed it out. What are the real questions? So, this catalyst, I think you mentioned that, the catalyst for change and so on. I think people are massively important within organizations, but also bringing in that transfer of skills, but not just that, but transfer of process and transfer of external ideas, but also the ability to question the status quo.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest danger of most organizations is being stuck to the status quo. I mean, that for me is probably one of the Achilles heels of most organizations. And that's why it's good to bring in some additional outside talent and ideas.
Yeah. I mean, on that point, one thing I've learned that's really key. I've learned it from mentors of mine, from books, from personal experience, is having a clear agreement from the leaders of the organization on the way forward, and then always bringing people back to that. So, for example, there's a firm I'm doing some side work with at the moment, and they have a particular proposition in one area of their business, but in the other, it was, we help all businesses. And then I said, well, then you haven't really nothing to sell because people don't know what you're about. You need to be very specific, in terms of your market proposition. And so we worked a bit on that. And then about 6 months down the road, we got to a point and it was like, well, I'm not sure, is this really our business? And then I've turned around and said, look, you told me 6 months ago, you don't want to continue the way you are. You told me that if you carry on the way you are, you're not going to have a business to sell in 10 years' time. Do you remember you told me that? So I'm telling you, if you want to change, we have to go down this road. You can keep doing what you want to do, and that's your choice if you want to do that. But remember what you told me. You told me you want to change. So let's get to it. So I think for me, this is where, as human beings, we fear change, and it's hard, especially if you've been going on the same track for a long time. And it happens in a personal situation, and it happens commercially. So
the other dynamic, Richard, I want to interrupt you quickly because we're going to run short of time, and I just want to make sure I get this last question in. Do you feel, as a consultant and doing fractional work and doing work with multiple entities, that because they've brought you in, it's almost like there's a new set of a new thinking of accountability? Now, I hear what you're saying about the person said they wanted to change, and 6 months later they're sort of questioning that. They're obviously in overwhelm or they're in doubt and so on. But there is a sense of accountability in a way, because if you're bringing in people from the outside, especially an expert, don't you think that there's a bit of an accountability dynamic that gets added to the mix over and above that, just bringing in additional talent? Because now you're bringing in people. Now they're asking questions. Now you're starting to have to be accountable to the decisions that you've made
Sure.
as the founder or owner or strategic direction. Tell me a bit about that, and then as you finish up, I want you to share, because we're coming close to the hour, a bit about you and the company and what your offer is, and sort of how people can get hold of you.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, on the accountability question, you know, at the end of the day, I want people to own their businesses. You know, I'm in that sense, I'm not the owner of the business or the founder, etc. So my job is to make sure they succeed. That's why I'm there. Yeah. And in the particular area of expertise that they've got me in for. And so so in that dynamic, my main goal is to empower people, yeah, to take that accountability and move forward with that change. And so I think for me, I'm really clear when I need to push back, yeah, and when I need to accept things that says, okay, no, actually this is on me, and you know, I've said I'll do X, Y, Z, and if you're not happy with that, that's fine. Let's work through that, etc. And we tweak the deliverable, or if for some reason it hasn't met the deadline, whatever it is, that's on me, and that's where I'm accountable for whatever I've said I'll do in that particular business. But you know, unless I'm a co-owner of the business, that's not my role. And so, and as you pointed out, sometimes that can get thrown on you. It's like, well, you know, why are we not further along? Why are we not there? Well, you know, I've told you what we need to do, and these are the steps, etc. But at the end of the day, you're accountable for the business. And so I think for me, what's important is developing that dynamic relationship, such that you just have to be really clear on your own role. Otherwise, it becomes murky, and there's lots of emotions. But if you're actually really clear on the deliverables and the outcomes, I've seen this with massive teams, with small teams, if everyone is clear on what they're trying to do, and you've got it down on a plan, and you know how you're going to get there and who's going to do that, it actually takes away a lot of the emotion of change, because you're always focused on these specific goals. Yeah. And that's fine if we need to adjust them, change them, but it kind of clears the air, you know. Hopefully that answers. Yeah.
No, it really does, and it's well answered. So tell me a little bit about the audience, about your company, what you do, or who you are, and how they can get hold of you if they want to work with you.
Yeah, so I mean, I do a number of different things, but in this specific space, the company I'm with is called fluidtalent.com. So this is something I set up with a founder of another tech firm, and it's the consulting arm of that. Yeah, so Fluid Talent, it's a specialty talent consulting business and technology company. So what we do is we support businesses with open talent innovation. Yeah, so it enables you from a tech perspective. We can build a freelance marketplace for you in a day, very fast, in whatever. So if you say to me, I want to build a freelance marketplace specifically for SAP for HANA Cloud specialists with 10 years experience who've worked in big enterprises of this size, I can build that for you within a day. Yeah, and we can tweak it, etc. And then at the same time, from a consulting perspective, I can then talk to you about how to market that and how to integrate that into your current processes. Or from a strategic perspective, okay, how do I incorporate this into my business model going forward? Yeah. So that's, and it's not necessarily just about the human cloud or the freelance human cloud. It's also about the mix of permanent, of freelancers, of outsourcers, and how do I leverage all of that to best fit my business outcomes. And then there's a separate business I have called Centric Global, which is more about strategy and growth. and saying, look, okay, you're in this place now and you want to get there. Let me help you together with my network to get to your growth goals. And the last few years has mainly been with scale-up businesses. So I sit with founders and I say, well, oftentimes founders, particularly in the tech space, love their product. And they're just, they can talk about their product all day, but aren't necessarily focused on building a business. And so I've done a lot of work in that particular environment, saying, okay, so what do you want to do with this business in 3 years' time? Do you want to exit? Do you want to be bought out? Do you want to merge? What's your funding life cycle? Have you thought about that? We've got this amazing product and everyone's going to love it. And, well, yes, but how are you running it as a business? And so it's one of the, I've got 7 key takeaways from founders and I've spoken to the last few years. And one of those is don't just focus on your product, because your product is not your business. The product is part of your business. There's all the other dimensions, as you can appreciate. So, but yeah, no, I mean, Dudley, thank you for the time to talk now. It's been great, and
you really added a lot of value, and I think from a podcast point of view, I think this is really a great. It's something completely different. It's something that I don't normally deal with within the space, but I think it's something that is becoming more and more and more important for people to start really thinking that through. Everyone's all about it from a marketing point of view. I need more leads. I need more customers. I need more of this and all that. And then they're wondering why they're just not, they're just running that treadmill. They're running into burnout and they're running into all kinds of things, but it just doesn't seem to be sort of coming together. And then there's lots of excuses and reasons why things are not working. But this has become probably one of the most prominent parts of growing and scaling a business. And even when it comes to exit, if you've got access to the right talent pool, because isn't that what buyers are buying at the end of the day?
Yeah.
Not just your product or your service or all that, but it's your ability to deliver on that promise. I come to Peter Drucker. He says, the purpose of any business is the acquisition of customers and the fulfillment of their needs. That's it. And you're really building a framework to be able to do that for a product or service that ever's going to market. That could be for you individually, or it could be for an organization, or it could even be for the fractional people that you bring into the business as well. And it applies to everybody.
Yeah, and it's I would say that I'm very well networked in this space, and also know of organizations that are partnered with that talk about what we call network optimization, which is built on about 20 years of research and with some prominent universities, and that is at an enterprise scale, helping leaders in enterprises be able to understand network optimization, and the talent piece is a part of that, a massive part of that. Because what's interesting is, so from an IT perspective, we used to have on-premise, you'd have on-premise servers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then things went on the cloud. Okay, in the talent space, it was all about on-premise, and someone's living in my particular geography, et cetera. And now talent's moving to the cloud. And what's interesting, there's a piece of research that actually the rate of growth and how it's moving is very similar to what happened in the kind of hardware to cloud space. So yeah, it's an absolutely fascinating area. But I guess what I'd like to put to the audience is, this is available now. Businesses can leverage this now. You don't have to wait 10 years for this. This can actually help your business really accelerate. And that's what I'm passionate about, is, look, we all want to grow. That's why we're in business. And it's understanding the best value you can add to your business by leveraging, in this case, the human cloud.
Love it, Richard. Definitely would like you on another episode, and we're going to talk a lot more. And we'll probably have a few conversations in between as well. But please come back. I just want to say goodbye to the audience. Just stay on the line, and I'll be back in a moment. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for another episode of 100 Days and Beyond, the podcast focused on mergers, acquisitions, and sort of post-merger integration or post-acquisition integration. However, I broke that focus today, and I've moved into what I think is a massive area that is critical to successful M&A, to successful post-merger integration work, but more so success to business and to people out there in this very, I would say, very challenging environment where we've gone through mass change. We've got people now wanting to work for purpose. They don't want to work for a salary at the end of the month. That is part of it. But a lot of people these days are saying, I want more meaning in life. I want more balance. I want to be able to spend more time with my family, and so on. And if you come across to this space, and I love that last analogy of the movement from on-premise software, IT infrastructure and so on, and software going into a cloud space where people, if I speak to some of the older generation sort of business owners and so on, they're like, I want to see my people. In the old days was I wanted to touch my server, I needed to be in my office. My computer that I'm working, I want to be able to touch the box. And it's almost like, I want to have visibility of my people in the office. Now, people are everywhere, and then we were forced into that to a great extent. But thank you very much, Richard. That was absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much, and I really hope you can join us on another episode. Thank you to everyone joining us today on 100 Days and Beyond the podcast. If you'd like to be featured on the podcast, you're welcome to let me know. And if you'd like to hear more about the different episodes that we've published, please go onto our YouTube channel or any one of the other channels and make sure that you like and subscribe. Thank you very much. Have a super week, and we'll speak to you again.